Kia ora talofa namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast. We're recording this on the 11th of February. Hope you're doing well across the lands of Aotearoa and the whole wide world, because we are here to discuss Aotearoa sport. And we're battling a bit of sickness, so bear with us. Might say a few dumb things, get a few things wrong, and might have a few mishaps, but we're out here soldiering on. I've got the sickness, and I reckon my comrade Nick has still got a bit of Mav sickness. Still got a bit of Mav sickness? Has that escalated over recent days?
Yeah, I suppose so, because there was a weird, just kind of emotional whiplash where Anthony Davis plays his first game against Steven Adams, coincidentally, and was amazing for 3 quarters, then got injured, and now is out for like a month. So yeah, there's a little bit of emotional whiplash with that one as well. So, but I guess maybe I don't know, maybe he just couldn't withstand 3 quarters up against Steven Adams was maybe a little bit too much for him, I guess.
How did old Steve-O perform in that outing?
Um, I think that was the game where he had like 9 field goal attempts and he made one of them, which was very uncharacteristic for him, but it was mostly just because he kept getting like tip back kind of offensive rebounds. He had about 9 offensive rebounds in that game. So the scoring left a bit to be desired, but the rebounding was just carrying on the way he's been going lately, which is just obscenely good. Just obscenely good board hounding, basically. He's grabbing pretty much everything. Like he's actually ratio wise, he's actually been outperforming his best previous seasons, obviously in a smaller sample. So if he's playing starter minutes, it probably would slow down a little bit, but he's just having these bursts off the bench and grabbing insane rebounds. But we did also see, I don't think it was in that Mavs game, or it might have been actually. I can't remember. I can't remember which one it was. But we did see some good extended minutes of him recently playing alongside Alperen Sengun. Finally, like we've been waiting all season for this. They said this when in the preseason, like, yeah, well, Sengun could play a little bit of power forward. Could have Adams out there with him at the same time, two bigs on the floor. But they tended to, when they're going with funky big lineups, they've always tended to go with just no bigs on the floor. They'd rather go small than ultra big. But Steven Adams' like plus minus stuff is incredible this season. Like when he's on the floor, the Rockets are a better team, and that's been consistent for several months now. So it's clearly not a fluke. Surely you want him out there with your best player at the same time as well. Then. So I'm hoping that's something that we'll see a bit more of. And my theory as to why we haven't seen it yet, considering it was being teased the whole way, is perhaps this is just one of those ones where Coach Ime Udoka maybe didn't want to show his hand too early. He didn't want people to see this because it's more of a ploy he wants to use in the playoffs. Perhaps I'm hoping that's the case rather than just negligence. I don't think negligence is too likely from the Houston Rockets organization at the moment. They seem to know what they're doing. So, and Udoka's clearly knows what he's doing as a coach. You can just look at the Houston Rockets record to see that. So yeah, good stuff from Steve-O. Much better stuff from Steve-O than from the Dallas Mavericks front office, unfortunately. But we move on. I focus on Steven Adams now.
I was going to say there's another Texas outfit that does love a bit of
Yeah, I know.
negligence. Just referencing to what you're saying, Funaki's stat says that Adams now leads all Rockets players in total plus minus, net rating, and net rating swing since January 1st. Who cares what they mean? Steven Adams is leading those stats, those advanced statistics for the Houston Rockets. So he's doing some good stuff there. We're obviously from the niche-cage.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sport. Not many updates on the website over the weekend. Been battling the illness and just been trying to survive. So we're just out here doing our best. I didn't do a newsletter bit yesterday, but my comrade did do a big newsletter yesterday with lots of notes about Aotearoa sport, many of which we are going to discuss here today. So you can sign up to our free newsletter via Substack, thenichecage.substack.com, and just join the party. That's where we discuss Aotearoa sport every Monday and Friday, There is a option to upgrade to a paid Substack subscription and access our bonus podcast every week, which we will probably be recording on Thursday with some leftover notes. I think we have 4 trophy games. Let me double check what's happening over the next couple of days. No, next round of Ford Trophy is Friday, so we might preview a bit of that and go deeper into Ford Trophy. We might go deeper into the Blackcaps, but they're not playing anymore because they're straight into the Tri-Series final. Great achievement for the Blackcaps in Pakistan. But we will have lots of rugby league team lists to discuss, and there's always a bit of football, maybe some A-League preview stuff later in the week as well. So that's what we do for our bonus podcast, our second podcast each week, which is available for paid Substack subscribers and folks in our Patreon whānau. Shout out to the Patreon whānau. Shout out to anyone with a paid Substack subscription. Shout out to anyone who's made a donation through Buy Me a Coffee as well. All of those are pretty damn awesome. We appreciate you. And they're all just a couple of dollars. Coffee, couple of dollars. Patreon, a couple of dollars a month. Substack, couple of dollars a month. That's if you want to keep us locked and loaded in the groove, doing what we do for Aotearoa Sport. Otherwise, your time and presence here with us in appreciation of Aotearoa Sport is it's completely fine. It's just fine. It's just happy days. Let us get a bit of mindfulness. What do you got, Chief?
Rightio. Henry Miller, he said, to sing, you must first open your mouth, which I interpret as, to do something beautiful, to do something creative, you got to make a little bit of an effort first. You got to have an intention, and you got to have the you got to put in the hard yards in order to go through with it. I guess opening your mouth isn't really hard yards, but we're speaking metaphorically here.
I'd love to offer some insights as well, but I'm struggling with the sporting insights, let alone the mindfulness insights. So I'll agree, I'll concur, I'll appreciate your mindfulness, and we will keep it moving. Let's get a bit of basketball updates, because I did see that Shea Ili, the one and only defensive maestro, has won the best defensive player in the NBL. Is this his second? Did he win it last year?
Second year in a row. He did win it last year, so he's done it consecutively. And this, but I mean, arguably, he could have won it in previous years as well. He'd gone close once or twice in the years preceding that too. He also had 1 or 2 years where there was a year where he didn't play a lot because of a concussion and whatever. So maybe some limited minutes hampered his prospects in that one before. But I think at this stage, and this winning consecutive Defensive Player of the Year awards absolutely confirms this. But I think maybe it was already kind of understood. Like, he now has the reputation of being the defensive guy in the National Basketball League. Like, you might get an import come in year on year or whatever, or you might have other guys who just have a good season or whatever, but Shea Ili is known as, like, because the award is just for the games of this season. But if you asked, like, I think now we're at the stage, and like I say, we're probably already at the stage before, where if you ask the average NBL media bloke or the average NBL, ask a few NBL veterans who have been around a few years and have probably the best understanding of what these things are and what they mean. Like, who is the best defender in the NBL? It's Shea Ili. Like, Shea Ili is the guy they're going to say, and he's now won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards to prove that. But he wasn't the only Kiwi getting amongst the awards either, because Tyrell Harrison last year was 3rd place in the most improved standings. This year, 1st place in the most improved standings. So he is the NBL's most improved player a year after being the 3rd most improved player. So that's a lot of improvement. I'm guessing next year he's shooting for the MVP or something. I mean, he had probably a little bit of a difficult year just because his Brisbane Bullets weren't very good. Like in general, they weren't great, but when they were at their best, it was generally because he was out there scoring buckets and especially grabbing rebounds and just doing those good big man things that he does. Um, and yeah, he's been recognized for the for improvements that he's been made, not just this year, but also, as I say, he was close to this last year. I think Sam Wardenberg also, he didn't make the final three, but he was on the long list of most improved players as well. As about like 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it was on the original. It's not really a very long list. I guess it's the longest short list. He was on the original short list before it got chopped down. So Sam Wardenberg also in contention there as well. Personally, I thought Sam Meninga might have gone close to maybe most improved, or maybe not for winning the thing, but at least getting on those sort of shortlist things. For most improved, or certainly I thought he had a chance for the next generation award, which Sam Wardenberg himself has had won, I think two or three seasons ago. But I think with Meninga, it was just a little bit too much inconsistency there, and not all of that was his fault. Some of it was because they decided to change their centers midway through the season for no apparent reason at the Breakers, and completely sent their own campaign into a tailspin. But even then, like Meninga had multiple games where he scored like 24, 25. I think he had peaked at 29 points in a game. He also had maybe a third of the games of the season where he scored in single digits, and his plus minus wasn't always very pretty and whatnot. So I think, yeah, with him, it was the highs were very high. The highs were award worthy, but there were also lows in there. Like he also had bad games to go with his good games, so just maybe not quite consistent enough to be up there amongst those others. But Sam Wardenberg was, and Tyrell Harrison absolutely was, because he won the most improved award, and Shea Ili is the consensus best defender in the NBL. So we got some good stuff out of the Kiwis on the NBL awards night.
In our newsletter on Monday, you also noted that you listed the best Kiwis in a bunch of stats. So Shea Ili won the best defensive player in the whole NBL, while also being fourth for points per game for Kiwis, 11.5 points per game. He was fifth for the most rebounds for Kiwis, 3.3 rebounds per game, and he was first for the most assists per game of Kiwis with 4.7. So Shea Ili isn't just like a defensive stopper. He's just he's a natural hooper who does everything well. And now he's going into finals basketball with Melbourne United, who they are chilling in the first round. We've got Southeast Melbourne versus Perth, and we've got Sydney versus Adelaide, I think. And
Yeah, I think that's right.
so they play the first round. Then Melbourne and Illawarra are waiting later on.
Yeah, it's like a play-in thing too. So that who'd you say Perth are playing?
Perth are playing Southeast Melbourne.
That's it. Yeah. So the winner of Perth and Southeast Melbourne goes on to play Melbourne United in the semi-finals. The loser plays the winner of Sydney versus Adelaide. Is sort of, there's like a staggered thing to that. And then whoever comes through that, the loser versus winner game will then play top-seeded Illawarra in the semi-finals.
And we've been talking about all season. Kiwis at the top of the NBL. Obviously got the Melbourne United lads, Shea Ili, Rob Lowe, Flynn Cameron, I reckon, as well. Liaf is going to be playing for Sydney. Perth, we've talked about it. Less minutes for Hiram Harris, but they've also got Ty Webster grinding away. Maybe a little bit of Dante Russo-Nance. What are we looking for in this first round of the NBL Finals?
Yeah, Russo-Nance will be like a garbage time type guy. If they win big, he might get some stuff there. But yeah, that's would like to see Perth go through, because Ty Webster had a couple of very good games coming back from a long injury layoff, and he looks like he'll be probably their sort of sixth man type guy in this situation. So the only thing there would be that if they did lose, and then they won the other playing game, then they would face Illawarra, and then we could get to a situation where we have a Perth versus Melbourne final, which would be the most New Zealanders we could get into the final series, would be if that happens. If Perth wins their next game, then they'll go on and face Melbourne in the semi-finals, which I think would be I think that's a rematch of last season. I think they might have made it the semis last year as well, but I can't remember exactly. But yeah, those are the two teams to keep an eye out for. But and every team has at least one New Zealander sprinkled somewhere on the roster, except for Illawarra, who were the top seeds. So unfortunately, they went the wrong way, but also had the best season. So it goes.
You also listed out the latest Tall Black squad. They are playing Hong Kong and Philippines later this month. Guys I don't know who are named in the squad. It does look like a bit of a younger, fresher squad to some degree. Who is Jackson Ball from Hawke's Bay Hawks?
That's a good question. It is definitely it's a younger squad in some areas, and then it's just also a bit of a backup squad in other areas because obviously the timing of this clashes with NBL playoffs. So Shea Ili's not going to be there. Rob Lowe's retired, but Flynn Cameron's not going to be there. Ty Webster's not going to be there, etc., etc. You do have one of the most experienced players possible involved because Corey Webster will be seeking to earn his 100th international cap in these games. He's at 99 right now, so he's just got to play in one of these two games. I don't think he's been playing anywhere. He didn't get an NBL contract this season. I don't think he went overseas or anything. Likewise, if he had gone overseas, he probably wouldn't be available because obviously you'd also don't have guys like Yanni Wetzel, Finn Delaney, Isaac Fotu, etc. Like they're not going to bring them back for these games because the Tall Blacks have already. These are Asia Cup qualifiers, and the Tall Blacks have already qualified for the Asia Cup. So they actually doesn't matter if they lose. They'll try to win both games and finish top if you can, sweet as. But there's kind of there's nothing at stake here or anything like that. So it makes it a good opportunity for Judd Flavel in his second tour in charge to mix it up a little bit. And one thing the Tall Blacks always like to do is to include like the 12th man on a 12-man roster will be a development player effectively. So we saw Hayden Jones do this for a debut last year. Julius Halefanua's done this for a debut. Oscar Goodman, pretty sure, played in the November window in Judd Flavel's first opportunity. And now here we've actually got two because Tama Isaac is in there, youngster from the Canterbury Rams who was in the All-Star 5 at the last FIBA under-18s. He's there. Obviously, someone Flavel's worked with closely in the New Zealand NBL for the last couple of years. His older brother debuted in Flavel's first tour anyway, Kai Isaac, who's a DP for the Breakers, and started to get a few, like him and Carlin Davison started to get a few decent minutes towards the end of the season as well, which was good to see. They boosted things up a lot more. Coach Kopp used his development players a fair bit more than Modi Mayor used to, so that was nice, especially because there wasn't much else to gain from that season by that point. But yeah, Tama Isaac is there, Canterbury Rams sharpshooter, definite NBL potential there, and Jackson Ball as well. Jackson Ball is even younger. If he debuts, he'll be, I think, the third youngest ever Tall Blacks debutant, following on from Isaiah Liafa and Ty Wynyard. It has the record. Ty Wynyard's actually also back in the squad for the first time in quite a long time, playing for the Tall Blacks. Jackson Ball, yeah, under 17 World Cup last year, part of that crew that made the semi-finals there at a FIBA event. The only New Zealand team to make the semi-finals at a FIBA event outside of the legendary 2002 Tall Blacks, which Judd Flavel was a part of. So yeah, nice stuff from Jackson Ball. He has played a bit of NBL. He will be Oscar Goodman's already debuted from that squad. Hayden Jones has debuted from that squad. So Jackson Ball would potentially be the third guy from that under-17 World Cup squad to have debuted for the senior team in a bit of a development role. Like they mix it up. They give a youngster or two a chance each time. He's the latest on that carousel. And yeah, there you go.
As the resident football expert, one thing I have observed is that the A-League, both A-League competitions, men and women, really embracing the brutality this season. Like, they don't give a shit what's happening on the field. So no surprises then that former A-League stalwart, well, not really stalwart because it was only a couple of seasons, one of the best products out of the A-League, specifically one of the best products out of the Wellington Phoenix, Liberato Cacace, absolutely destroyed Kyle Walker's ankle. We've got the GIF here on our Twitter page. It looks like it's terrible. And apparently, no yellow card, not even no red card. By the looks of it, no free kick. And he literally
No, there was a free kick.
Oh.
There was a free kick. They just took ages to take the free kick because the AC Milan players couldn't believe that it wasn't being. Well, first of all, Kyle Walker, I think, probably had some medical attention to getting his leg half snapped, and then I think they just couldn't quite believe that. Like they will, you always takes time these days anyway. You take time with the restarts because you want to give the VAR a chance to have a look, right? Well, they gave the VAR a chance to have a look, and the VAR was like, "Nah." No, ref gave a free kick. What more do you want? That's fine. Carry on. Pick up where you left off. Get the game going. There were later in the second half, both teams had a red card, and they were, the AC Milan one was for like a second yellow, so that was fair enough. The Empoli one was like two guys going for a header. One guy shoves his arm back, slaps the guy in the throat. They both fall over. Then the guy who slapped him in the throat pushes him down while he's trying to get back up again. So the Empoli guy like kicks him, and obviously you can't be kicking him. So he got a red card for kicking him. The other guy who instigated it by needling at him a couple of times got away with the yellow card. But yeah, AC Milan went on to win that game. So there was some further refereeing debates throughout that game, but somehow the most violent of all the challenges got away with nothing. So nothing except a free kick. But I mean, that was like Kyle Walker's second or third game in Italy since he joined on loan from Manchester City. So I guess Cacace was just giving him a bit of a welcome to Serie A moment,
Well, when you said
we do things differently here.
When you said there were two red cards later in the game, I was like, did someone like punch a bloke, or did like the ref get like abused or something? Because I don't know about you, like Cacace's challenge, maybe in the A-League, even in the A-League, I think it's a red card.
I think he did get sent off for something like that in the A-League once, I have a feeling. I'm not sure exactly, but
But what do you think about this?
Conflated with some of the Alex Rufer ones, but it's
what do you think this challenge is?
Straight red card.
Right, okay.
It's not intentional. He's going for the ball and he gets there late, but like if you're that late and you are leading with a bit of a stomp, you're taking that risk, aren't you? And that was, you plant 6 sprigs in a bugger's shins. I think you probably deserve a red card for that, and kind of stunned that the VAR didn't think so. Maybe it was just too early in the game. It was like 5 minutes into it. Maybe they're just like, let's at least have a contest here, So it's worked out for us because it means Cacace is not suspended and he can continue to play in the next couple games, because he is actually on a really nice run of not just appearances, but mostly starting games for Empoli. He hardly started anything in the first sort of month and a half of the season, but then more recently he's in the starting lineup for most games, even though it's not often he's getting to start in his favored position of the left wing back role. I mean, here was another one. The reason he was up there going against their AC Milan's right back is because he was starting again as a left winger. So they're just fitting him in wherever they can. There were some links with Besiktas in Turkey were trying to get him. They're looking for another left back. Their first choice wasn't, went somewhere else when signed. There was a Danish fellow who went and signed with Benfica instead. Different club starting with B. So Besiktas moved on to the next option, which was apparently Liberato Cacace. So he could have been playing for under the managerial guidance of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer right about now, but Empoli were like, well, no, we don't want to sell a player who's starting most games for us while we're in a relegation battle when it's too late for us to have time to sign a replacement. So they slapped them back, and that disappeared. There might be some more transfer stuff for him, as there was before the season. There might be more, like, might have to pick up where that left off at the end of the season when he enters the last year of his contract. But for now, he's in a pretty solid role at Empoli where like look if they're figuring out ways to get him into the starting lineup, including playing him out of position, clearly they rate him relatively highly. They've got a lot of injuries in the squad at the moment, but he's been one of their most reliable players lately. So I'm very glad he didn't get sent off, and I'm very glad he's not suspended for the next like 3 games or whatever it would have been for a violent contact red card.
I had to stop. I had to pause that GIF. It was just playing over and over again of just this dude's ankle just getting destroyed. So as much
for the record, Carl Walker played on for the rest of that game. So shin pads are doing the Lord's work there for him.
I don't think it's a couple of scratches on your shins that you need to worry about with that type of challenge. It's a snapped leg.
Yeah, well, if the leg didn't snap, then I guess you play on. As you did.
I'm actually confused. I don't know if it makes me like Cacace more or be like, yo, you got to chill out because that was brutal. But I kind of appreciate it. So shout out to him. And another Kiwi who continues to perform very well in Europe, Tyler Bindon. And here is Talk Reading with stats from his game versus Huddersfield, which was this his first game after signing with Nottingham Forest, but then staying with Reading on loan. So first game as a Reading loan player, obviously continuing the season with Reading. 75 touches, which was the most. I'm assuming these are the most for Reading. 54 passes, most for Reading. 9 clearances, the most. 6 aerial duels, 1, the most. 2 shots blocked, the most. And then I also saw the little montage of some of his highlights. Was that, I don't know if that was recently or a couple of years ago when he was playing like under 20s or whatever it was for Reading, but like he's got turns, he's got like subtle touches. This dude isn't your regular Kiwi centre back. This dude is an absolute wizard. What's the latest with Tyler Bindon, fresh after signing with Nottingham Forest?
That's the Tyler Bindon hates the Swindon compilation, right? That I think I chucked up in Flying Kiwis last week as well, because I watched that and I was like, it's one thing to track a dude week to week to week, but when you start clipping out all the highlights and putting them all together like that, and it was sort of segmented too. So it's like, here's a bunch of goal line clearances. Now here's a bunch of like him turning a pressing defender, like attacker pressing on him and him just turning into space and carrying forward. Here's a bunch of great passes. Here's a bunch of like headers or tackles or whatever. And he makes some crunching tackles for a dude who is like not only young, but he looks even younger than he is. We see his face, and he's out there making like thumping challenges, and he's survived in League One the whole time there with Reading, like very physical league, very quite experienced league as well. Like he's getting more minutes than anyone else in his age range over like last season and this season. And yeah, all of that was first team stuff for Reading, because he never actually played reserve team he signed with them as like an 18-year-old and went straight into the first team and pretty quickly became an impactful player for their first team, and within 6 months became a first 11 regular starter and key player for their first team there. I don't know if he's ever played a reserve game for them, actually, come to think of it, which is crazy when you like considering his age and the fact that he just kind of turned up there one day on trial. Like it's not like they went out there and signed him from an A-League team or whatever and said, we like, what happened to Cacace, for example, after he played 50 odd times for the Phoenix. Like this guy came from LAFC Academy or something like that. Like he just moved there from America and just turned up at their doorstep, and they ended up having a player who was so good they were able to sell him to a Premier League team within 2 years. Like incredible stuff. And yeah, he just picked up where he left off for Reading in his first game. Yeah, his first game as a Reading loanee instead of a Reading full-time player, but also in a strange way, like nothing changed. He just had a day trip to Nottingham and took some photos and went back and then picked up where he left off. And yeah, it was great for them. And a 0-0 draw against Huddersfield, but that's away to a team above them on the table. Like it's points that they, obviously they want to win as many games as they can because they're trying to get up into the playoffs. But this was a good, solid point for them. A strong, clean sheet against a good team. And Tyler Bindon was maybe the best player on the park for Reading. Once again, as has been the case so often this season, like those Nottingham Forest do a lot of transfer work, right? They sign a lot of players, and it's not just they're signing players from they signed Bindon from League One. They're also signing dudes out of Brazil. They're signing guys out of Greece, or they're signing guys from other places and loaning them to their team in Greece, as they did with Marko Stamenic, who was playing in Serbia when they found him. Like this is a club that does a lot of hard work on their scouting stuff. And for a little while there after they got promoted, there was a bit like maybe you're doing too much work and signing too many players. He's just got this big bloated squad. But since Nuno Espirito Santo came in, he's been able to like chisel it down to the players that he wants. And the fact that he had all the players that he wanted, pretty much, like he hardly any of the guys there. It's like a couple of signings that they've made. Like Matt Sells has come in a goalkeeper and taken them to another level. Milinkovic at centre back has been absolutely superb to help take them to another level as well. Like those guys have been crucial this season. But most of the players he's working with, he inherited from this massive squad that Nottingham Forest had. So even though they were signing probably too many players, and there was a little bit of a how do you fit everyone in here thing going on, they had quality in the squad, and that's clear now. And they've added they've added Tyler Binder, but they also added Marko Stamenic 6 months ago as well. So these are guys that this very diligent scouting club, who looks all over the world to find the best prospects for their team, have singled out and brought into their wider system. So like there's no guarantee they'll ever play in the Premier League. We hope they will, but there's obviously the possibility that they might just end up a couple of loans out and then sold somewhere else or released or whatever. Like that does happen. Sort of like what happened to Sabrit Singh at Bayern Munich, for example, although that's obviously a trickier club to get into, being Bayern Munich. Like he was with Bayern Munich while they were winning the Champions League, But yeah, the fact that not just one but two New Zealanders within the last year have been scouted and signed by a team like Nottingham Forest is just such an amazing reflection, I think, on where Kiwi football is at the moment, let alone the fact that their top goal scorer, one of the best, most informed players in the entire league, is also a New Zealander, Mr. Chris Wood, too.
Let's put Suya Haering and Oliver Colloty in the Flying Kiwi spotlight this week. I think Suya Haering was called up to the recent Football Ferns squad.
No, that was her teammate Maya Hahn was called up. They both play together in Turbine Potsdam in Germany, which is a team that used to be one of the dominant forces in Germany, but this is getting a little while ago now. That's sort of 15, 20 years ago. More recently, they've just been a team that struggles financially. They're not one of in fact, they might be the only team in the Bundesliga this season. I'm not sure who don't have a men's team equivalent to be able to prop them up financially and just with general clout as well. So they're obviously, as an independent, it's pretty bloody difficult, and they're struggling badly. Like they've had one draw and lost every other game, and they actually lost 9-0 on the weekend. It was pretty disastrous, playing against the top team. So they're playing against Eintracht Frankfurt, who beat them 6-0 earlier in the season, beat them 9-0 this time. They were 4-0 down after about 30 minutes, but then they actually steadied the ship pretty solidly for quite a while until they got a red card with about 20 minutes to go, and then conceded like 5 more times in the second half after that. But there was a spell in the middle there where they found a little bit of steel, and within that was that Suya Haering goal line clearance, which is kind of crazy, just swooping in there, sliding the left back, getting across to the sort of right inside corner of the goal, clearing the ball off the line, hooking it away. Yeah, great stuff. She joined them last January, so she's been with the club for about 13 months. Used to play for Auckland United, was at the Under-20 World Cup last year with New Zealand as well. So one of our better prospects coming forward. I often thought, watching her in the National League, she does remind me a lot of like a young Ellie Riley. So there's a pretty clear left back, legend there to emulate in her career. But probably one of the sneaky undercover ones, I think, across Flying Kiwis, where I'm not sure, but maybe it's just because she hasn't played for the Football Ferns yet, because she is quite young, and just left back's been a position where we've had a lot of contenders lately. Maybe someone a lot of people don't really know about. She actually only she like I said, she joined them last January. She didn't play for their first team though. She went into their sort of academy side for the rest of last season as they were getting promoted back up into the German top flight. They're now going to get relegated back down to the second tier, so it seems like they might just be a bit of a yo-yo team at the moment. But yeah, probably I don't know. She started getting on benches throughout the season. She got a debut off the bench as a substitute a couple weeks ago, but in their last game before the winter break against Bayern Munich, she randomly found her way into the starting lineup. Then obviously they lost that game because they've lost basically all their games. But when they came back after the winter break, she was still in the starting lineup. So they'd had the opportunity to do a bunch of training. They had the opportunity to sign some players. They kept Suya Haering in as their left back. It's sort of left wing back. I think they play with a back three, but it's actually a back five because they're just always defending because they're always losing. So she's not getting to run forward very much. She is basically defending like a left back, just with an extra center back inside. But she's done solid work. I thought she was one of their better players from what I saw of the extended highlights of the Frankfurt game. That clearance being front and center there. That was the second week in a row in which both Suya Haering, so Haering's third start, and also the second week in a row where both she and Maya Hahn have started together. So two New Zealanders starting for a Bundesliga team, like one of the top leagues in Europe. Two New Zealanders in the same starting lineup. I went through like the England, France, Italy. No point looking at Spain because no one's ever played in Spain from New Zealand in the top division that I know of. Looking through these different things, like when was the last time we had two New Zealanders in the same starting lineup? It's never happened in men's football that I can figure. We've only had a couple of in Germany, like Winston Rufer and Sarpreet Singh, and they never crossed over. Obviously, never happened in the Premier League. Although it might in the future if Tyler Bindon or Marcus Stamenic is able to join Chris Wood there at Nottingham Forest, or just together. Maybe they outlast them. As far as I can tell, it would have been about 7 years ago when Amber Hearn was still playing and Michaela Moore had a season alongside her at FC Köln. So it's been a little while. This is quite a rarity to have two New Zealanders together in a top division like that. And now they seem to both be starting games too. So this is an angle I've been trying to play up a fair bit lately in the Flying Kiwi stuff. I think this is maybe one of those undercover ones where Maya Hahn wasn't associated with New Zealand for a little while there, tried to make the German under-20s. Now she's back playing Football Ferns. Suya Haering, it won't be far away from a Football Ferns call-up herself, the way she's gone. I think there's a little bit of an undercover spotlight that needs to be shone here of two players who probably not enough people know about them yet, but they will very soon.
So that was 9-0, but it would have been 10-0 without Suya Haering.
She saved it from being double figures.
Nice work.
Big moment.
Hopefully the two Kiwis thing can happen for a team that isn't losing 9-0. That would be a lot nicer.
Yeah.
Quickly, we also...
It would.
I've seen Ollie Colloty floating around a wee bit over the recent months. Who is he and where is he and what's he doing?
New Zealand under-20s striker from the last under-20 World Cup, so 2 years ago. He played, I think he's from Christchurch originally. I mean, actually, he might even be from Dunedin, but he played a bit for Christchurch United. He played a bit for Melville. He's sort of one of those players who has been quite proactive with his career. Like he's gone looking for the best opportunity for him, which hasn't always worked out. So he had a great season in the National League with Melville leading into that under-20 World Cup. He was pretty good at that under-20 World Cup, but then he's had like a bunch of things bouncing around, doing trials in England with a whole heap of clubs throughout the pyramid there, and mostly getting good feedback, but not getting contracts. Like no one actually went out and signed him. Came back and was with Wellington Olympic for a little bit, but didn't really stick around there. Went to Auckland United for a bit, didn't really stick around there. He might have even been Auckland City for a little bit. Maybe it wasn't Auckland United, I can't remember exactly, but that's a consequence of the fact that for someone who's probably 21 now, maybe, he's just played in a bunch of different teams. Like he hasn't really settled into a spot and stuck around, but he is a striker who has shades of a young Chris Wood. I don't know. I think that's just too easy of a example to give for someone who is like a tall, strong target man type center forward. But he's always been a good finisher, very good from the penalty spot as well. That's something we saw certainly in the National League. And where he's ended up professionally, finally got a contract, was in the fourth tier, I think it is. Yeah, fourth tier. So League Two of Scottish football, playing for Peterhead FC. So not quite like the Premier League where he might have wanted to end up, but you take what you can get. You get he's got the opportunity to get it started on his professional career. It was a little bit of a delay because they signed him a few months back, but they couldn't register him until January. So it's only in the last month that he's been able to actually play games for them. Made his first start on the weekend, scored his first goal on the weekend. So straight into not straight into the starting lineup. He played 4 or 5 times off the bench leading up to that. But when he finally does get in the starting lineup, he rewards them with a goal, and hopefully he kicks on from here because he is a player who he might be playing low down there, but this is a team challenging for promotion. So he's re-signed for next season. If they can get promoted, get into the third tier, see how they go there. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that George Stanger was doing the same thing, where he was playing fourth tier. He was when moved up to, I think he transferred to a third tier club, and then they got promoted. Then he transferred to another team, and now he's challenging to try get promoted to the top flight in Scotland, and probably not too far away from a potential All Whites call-up, actually, as far as George Stanger goes. So there is a pathway there. There is a ladder that Ollie Colloty is on, and it's just good to see him. Good to see a guy who's a good attacking prospect for New Zealand finally lock into a situation, dig in his heels, and hopefully score a bunch of goals.
We will preview the weekend's A-League games in our bonus podcast on Thursday, but we do need to discuss the anticipated debut of Ella Jerez for the Wellington Phoenix women. Came on in the second half of their 1-1 draw with Melbourne victory. What'd you make of Ella Jerez getting her first A-League start, and do you see her playing a bit more footy for the Wellington Phoenix? Because I do think not only this is a bit long range, but as we've said before, and to be honest, again, this is another thing about all the youngsters in Aotearoa sport. They all add a different style to the traditional Kiwi elements. We got funky seamers. There's a lot more rugby league halves coming out of Aotearoa now, and so on. Ella Jerez, a very strong attacker. She's got speed, she's got skill, she's got something to add women's football in New Zealand. Narrow that down a bit to the present moment. She's got something I think that can add value to the Wellington Phoenix as they chase finals footy in the A-League. They are 8th on the ladder, chasing the top 6. So how do you view Ella Jerez and her chances of getting more game time for the Wellington Phoenix? I'd also add, we've talked about Emma Main and her attacking impetus, as well as, who's the other striker? Ferguson?
Olivia Ferguson, yeah.
Yeah. Main and Ferguson have caught my eye as high energy, physical, attacking players. I think Jerez has a bit of finesse, a bit of pizzazz to her footy as well. So what do you make of Ella Jerez making a debut for the Wellington Phoenix, and how do you view her chances of more football coming over the next few weeks as the Phoenix chase finals footy?
Yeah, I was, like you said, this was anticipated. As soon as she got a scholarship contract, generally the scholarship players do debut at some point in those seasons. Like that happened last season. It's for the women and for the men. The way that the club operates is those opportunities will swing around at some point, but the Phoenix women did have a very, very, very stable team for quite a while there. Just didn't have a lot of injuries and weren't were rotating a lot within this sort of 16, 17 player squad that they had. It was a bit tricky for the likes of Olivia Ingham, Ella McMillan, and of course Ella Jerez as well, who hadn't made a she'd been in a couple of wider squads, but she hadn't been in a match day squad up until the weekend when she did, and she did get that debut. So it was an anticipated one. It was a little bit of a weird one too, because she gets subbed on and there's the on the commentary is like a note about how her family moved to Wellington to support her football career and stuff, and what a sweet moment. And then obviously the A-League official accounts pick up on that, and they're sharing this thing about, well, Ella Jerez's whole family moved to Wellington to help. And I'm watching this thinking like, you could say that about pretty much every player who debuts for the Wellington Phoenix or for any A-League team or for any like professional sport. Everyone's got family who made sacrifices to get them where they are. Like it doesn't make it any less of a cool story. It's certainly a cool story. It's just that giving Ella Jerez the same narrative as everyone else who debuts is not right, because Ella Jerez is not like everyone else.
It's very common for the Kiwi NRL juniors as well.
I bet it is. Yeah.
There's a lot who move to Australia to pursue rugby league, and their family moves with them. Like the whole family moves just because there's a rugby league opportunity.
Yeah, and like those are real sacrifices, and those are those are great stories. It's just that Ella Jerez scored the winning goal in a Kate Shepherd Cup final as a 15-year-old. You know, that you can talk about a lot of family sacrifices, beautiful though they are. You can't give anyone else, like you can't say that about anyone else, though. You can't say anyone else is coming on to score on this player 2 years ago when they were 15 years old scored the winning goal in a Kate Shepherd Cup final. But Ella Jerez did that. She's already played an under-17 World Cup. She was excellent for the Wellington Phoenix reserves whenever she played for them last year, but it wasn't that much because it clashed with A-League preseason, which is another reason to see that she was pretty clearly heading towards an A-League debut at some stage in this campaign. I think maybe Paul Temple was also just being a bit patient with it, which would make sense. Like, she is very young still. She was the second youngest player to ever play for the Wellington Phoenix women. Only Millie Clegg was younger, and we know what a unicorn prospect Millie Clegg was coming through. Ella Jerez is in the same basket. Like, it's the same thing. And yeah, maybe you give a player a little bit of time to adjust to the lifestyle and the ins and outs of the match day prep and all this before you chuck them on and expect them to do stuff for you. So that makes sense. But yeah, how is she going to, like, what are the minutes going to look like from this point onwards? Well, there's a potential that she just drops out and Mibe Tanaka comes back in and takes that spot or whatever. I do think also, though, there is a potential she might just stay in the first team for the rest of the season, because they didn't win that game against Melbourne Victory at Pororua Park. They were winning very early on, but they couldn't find a second goal, and then they ended up conceding a silly one and drew 1-1, which ordinarily would be a decent result against a strong Melbourne Victory team. But unfortunately, it came after back-to-back away 1-0 losses to Central Coast and to Adelaide, Central Coast and Brisbane, two teams right there around them on the table competing for top six. So just crucial points that they not only didn't get themselves, but allowed their opponents to get instead in games with, like, they could have won all three of these past three games. The performances were good enough to win each and every one of those games, but they lacked a little bit of creativity, and they lacked a bit of finishing even when they did have the creativity. So they need goals. They need attacking, just something extra in the attack. They're maybe just a little bit too reliant on the same outlets at the moment. And Ella Jerez offers that. And she might be young, she might be raw, and she might be inexperienced, but she does give them something different, and she gives them something versatile as well, because she can play as a winger, she can play as a 10, she can play as a striker, she can be the player who runs through and behind, making that bursting run through the defensive line to score, as she did in that Kate Shepherd Cup final. Or she might be the player playing that through ball, because she can do that just as well. She can shoot from distance, she can dribble past defenders. Haven't seen a lot of her winning headers and stuff like that, so there might be one weakness to work on in her attacking game, but she does pretty much everything else. And she's a scrappy player too. Like, she runs around, she works hard, she bites into tackles and whatever. Maybe not as hard as Libby Cacace does, but certainly no less than players like I think that's something Alyssa Wynnham's really added to her game this season, and Macy Fraser before her, very good at like doing the same. Well, Macy Fraser was excellent at doing that stuff, working back and winning the ball again from when the team loses possession, counter pressing, stuff like that. So she, like Ella Jerez, has all the skills to do that as well. I think just she might be young and inexperienced, but she also is kind of just a special prospect coming through. Has been has been someone I've had my eye on for a couple of years for that reason. Like, I think she is in that top tier of prospects that we've seen in the last few years alongside Millie Clegg. Like, Millie Clegg might be the only better player that I can remember watching at National League level at that same age in the last 3 or 4 seasons or whatever. I would be perfectly happy, and I think it would be to the benefit of the team if she just sticks around getting 15 minutes off the bench for the rest of the season, and maybe even getting a start here or there, maybe 30, 45 minutes on some certain occasions as well. I think she genuinely has something to offer to the Wellington Phoenix, which is something they very much need, which is that attacking versatility, which is that just little bit of extra creative spark, which is that right now is lacking, and not just lacking, but lacking in a way where it's quite seriously threatening to cost them that top six spot, because these last few games they're letting points slip through their fingers because they don't have this thing. Well, here's someone who might just be able to offer a bit of that.
The Blackcaps. They have been playing a tri-series in Pakistan. And they have won both games they've played. They had a win over Pakistan, then they had a win over South Africa, and obviously Kane Williamson must have been fantastic if he's got the background treatment for both of us in the video. For my segments, I can only do so much talking, so I'll just try roll through a few key points. First key point, Tom Latham. 2 ducks.
Guess what score Tom Latham got in his previous ODI before this series as well?
I'd imagine it was a duck.
He's got 3 ODI ducks in a row. I don't know when that was. It was against Sri Lanka, so I guess it was one of the recent Sri Lanka things. But yeah,
I
3 ducks in a
remember.
row is not great.
I need to double check this because I think he was LBW. I think he's been out LBW maybe, who cares? But he was definitely playing across the line. And this flows into ODI stats since the start of 2023. So I've gone from the kind of last 4 months, which started with the tour of Sri Lanka, which had a lot of more of a development squad. And then I extended it back. That was kind of the main ODI stats that I was using because they hadn't played an ODI prior to that in 2024. But they did play a lot of ODI cricket in 2023 before and during the World Cup. So since the start of 2023, Tom Latham, he's averaging 25.6, which isn't great. But thankfully, we do have Daryl Mitchell averaging 49.4. We got Will Young averaging 45.1. We got Rachin Ravindra averaging 40.4. Devon Conway averaging 48.3, and Devon Conway back in the runs, scored a nice 90 odd against South Africa. And this is the thing about Tom Latham. I do reckon if you're not scoring runs in these conditions, you might have a few issues because there's a lot of runs being scored. And these runs are being scored fairly quickly. Like even Kane Williamson got behind you there, strike rate of 117. So blokes are scoring runs, and they're scoring runs quickly, which will be a theme of the Champions Trophy. What do you think Kane Williamson is averaging since the start of 2023?
Right. Well, he scored 133 not out yesterday and got a 50 in the other game. So I know he didn't play a single ODI in 2024, and I don't think he would have played very many. Wait, was 2023 the World Cup year? Okay, so we're counting the World Cup. So there's actually is a decent amount of thing there, but he's just boosted it with 180 runs for 1 dismissal in this series. I'm guessing it's somewhere in excess of 60.
87.2.
Wow. How many innings do you know?
Well, this is the thing. He has scored 1 century and 650s. So 7 scores over 50 in 9 innings.
That's madness.
That is madness. The in this tri series, we've also had Williamson scored a century, scored a 50. Devon Conway got his 90 odd. Because Rutch and Ravindra, they initially had Will Young and Ravindra. Ravindra got cut on the forehead, so Conway came in. And Conway took his chance. So this is an interesting little selection area, is the opening combo. Because Will Young hasn't got a 50-plus score. Now again, we've got 4 dudes who have scored a 50 or more in 2 games. We got Michael Bracewell, who scored 31 runs at a strike rate of 134. Rachin Ravindra got 25 runs at a strike rate of 131. Dudes are scoring runs, and they're scoring runs quickly. So if you're not scoring runs, it's going to be tricky for you to stay in the team. And even though Will Young is averaging 45.1 since the start of 2023, maybe Conway's taken that opportunity. So that's one interesting little selection area to watch out for. I was a little bit concerned about Matt Henry. Because again, these conditions, I wouldn't necessarily say they're nibbly. Hence, blokes are scoring a lot of runs and they're scoring them quickly. But the leading wicket taker in the tri-series so far for New Zealand is Matt Henry. He's got 5 wickets, average of 22.4, 5.6 RPO. Michael Bracewell and Santner both have 3 wickets so far. And Will O'Rourke's got 2. Glenn Phillips has 1. Ben Sears has played both games, doesn't have a wicket, going for 6.5 RPO. Not as expensive as Will O'Rourke, who's going at 6.3 RPO. But Will O'Rourke's conceding a lot of runs, getting like inside edges because of his freaky movement into the right-handers. So another little area of selection intrigue is Ben Sears, because he's played in both games as a first 11 bowler, but he hasn't taken a wicket and he's been quite expensive. And he hasn't bowled his full 20 overs either. The only bowlers, well, Matt Henry, 19.5 overs, then you got the 2 spinners, Bracewell and Santner. So those are 2 little selection pockets. I think you could add the Tom Latham wicketkeeper role as a selection pocket to watch out for.
Well, particularly because the backup wicketkeeper in the squad, the only other guy they've picked who can play wicketkeeper is Devon Conway, who we're now talking about like, well, maybe he's found a little bit of form and maybe he's ready to go. I have a theory on that, which is that Devon Conway was like he was a good enough player in South African domestic cricket before he moved over, but he wasn't anything spectacular. Like he was just sort of an average guy. He had been a decent prospect, didn't really kick on, moved to New Zealand, became world class, then lost his form. Well, what do you do when you lose something? You look in the last place you found it, or last place you remember seeing it, right? So he's gone back to South Africa, had a okay, like not bad, not good, just an okay SAT 20. Moved back to play for the New Zealand team at the Champions Trophy and has rediscovered his form, perhaps. You know, there might be a little bit of a retracing your steps thing going on there with Devon Conway. But yeah, he looked like vintage Conway in that innings, which was exciting, and that does open up a little bit of a can of worms selection-wise.
Can't forget Glenn Phillips banging a century down the order in the first ODI. And he isn't one of the Blackcaps who is averaging over 40 since the start of 2023, but he is averaging 37.9 with a strike rate of 100. So the Blackcaps right now, since the start of 2023 in ODI cricket, There are 6 batters who have scored 700 or more runs. Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra have strike rates of 100 or more. Daryl Mitchell has a strike rate of 99.77. And Devon Conway has a strike rate of 97.86. So when I initially looked at that chart, I was like, oh, the youngsters. But Mitchell and Conway are a smidge below 100 strike rates. To me, when you add in Michael Bracewell, he's got 324 runs at a strike rate of 119.5. If they need Mark Chapman, because Mark Chapman's been 12th man in both ODIs, if they need him to play, he's got 474 runs at a strike rate of 105.5. In conditions where blokes are scoring runs and they're scoring them runs quickly, I think the Blackcaps are well equipped for this Champions Trophy tournament. I also think they will be the best fielding team at the tournament. Like, especially now that Santner is kind of patrolling that inner ring. I think that is a more recent I think it is like in the last few years that he has moved into the inner ring more consistently, and I think somehow the team just feels better as with Santner as the captain. I'm not sure if you've picked up on that, but his fielding is exquisite. Glenn Phillips is a machine in the field as well, and everyone else is highly competitive in the field. So I think the Blackcaps can return to their best in world fielding standards. I think they have the batting power to score enough runs consistently. The third or fourth, the second or third seamers is where I'm most curious for their Champions Trophy chances, because Matt Henry's pretty good. They got some decent spinners who can do a job. They're crafty. Like Michael Bracewell again took an amazing one-handed catch in the first ODI. Like Santner and Bracewell, Santner, his bowling stuff isn't fantastic. He's averaging 37.6. Bracewell's averaging 33, but to be honest, there's not many Blackcaps who are averaging below 30 in ODI cricket since the start of 2023. Matt Henry's averaging 24.9. Then you go Santner, Bolt, Ferguson. They're not playing. Ravindra, 47.3. Southey, 33.2. Like these dudes, most of these dudes on the list aren't playing. Phillips, 43.8. Will O'Rourke, 37.1. Daryl Mitchell, 24.11. But something makes me think that Daryl Mitchell might get smashed in these conditions. I think the Blackcaps, I think Will O'Rourke's going to be a really important bowler for them at the Champions Trophy with his X factor, his pace, his bounce, and what appears to be pretty batter-friendly conditions. One other thing I will say, the Pakistan game, Pakistan's playing, so the crowd is big, they're going nuts. And Pakistan loves cricket so much. Who came up with this bilateral shit?
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't refer to any series as a bilateral series. No, it's just two teams playing some games of cricket. It's a cricket series. It's not a bilateral series. We're playing an ODI series. We're playing a T20 series. You're touring the country. Like, that just seems like far more logical cricketing language.
Very crick info term, I think, that bilateral.
Right, yeah. Well, funnily enough, the folks who love to complain about cricket the most tend to be Crick Info, and they always poo-poo the bilateral series. This is not a bilateral series, but this is a warm-up tri-series. I get your tri-series because you've got 3 teams competing. Like, that makes sense.
Trilateral?
Well, it's a trilateral series we got here. This is a warm-up series for the Champions Trophy. Obviously, Pakistan loves cricket a lot. So they're going to show up big numbers because they're, they love cricket. But those dudes were going crazy for every Glenn Phillips 6. There were dudes in that crowd, and women, kids, everyone. There were cricket fans in that crowd who had New Zealand flags. They got South Africa flags. Like, they're there to support cricket. In a warm-up series of ODI cricket. The format that everyone loves to hate, everyone says is like gonna die, is going to be the first, like, what's the point of ODI cricket? Well, fans are there to watch it, Fans are having fun. We're playing some cricket. And it's a warm-up series in which fans are heavily engaged, because that New Zealand versus South Africa game, they got nothing to do with Pakistan. But there's still fans watching high-quality one-day cricket. So I want to double down that people need to chill out with cricket. Maybe this is just some anger and frustration about being sick, but it's just like, okay, we've talked about it before, the death of Test cricket. Pretty confident people are saying Test cricket has been dying for 100 years. Okay, all the issues about global cricket. Who are the people who complain the most about global cricket? It's people from England, it's people from India, it's people from Australia. The rest of the world is having a lot of fun with cricket. We're enjoying our cricket. We're not stressed about the state of cricket. But there seems to be so much attention on the state of cricket from the 3 nations who, to be honest, if you do want to complain about the state of cricket, 3 nations have put us in this position. But then the people who complain about the state of cricket come from those 3 nations. It's so weird. But all of that was hammered home when I'm watching New Zealand versus South Africa, and there's a couple thousand, maybe more. There's thousands of Pakistanis there to watch Kane Williamson hit a century, to watch the South African bloke on debut hit a century. In the format that is meant to be in the most fragile position. Like, this wasn't T20 cricket, where everyone's meant to be loving T20 cricket. We'll go out there and, we're the modern way of playing cricket. No, this was ODI cricket, the format that is meant to matter the least. But Pakistanis still showed out to watch New Zealand versus South Africa. Pakistanis still went crazy when Glenn Phillips was playing good cricket. So I think for those of us in New Zealand, those of us around the world who do not partake or are not from the small 3 cricketing nations, we're happy with how cricket is, I think. But the perception is driven, let's call it the Cricinfo nations. The perception is driven by the Cricinfo nations. I don't want to be stink to Cricinfo, because Wisden does this a lot as well. There's other cricketing publications who do this a lot as well. But if you're outside the 3 major nations, I think you should be pretty content and grateful for the state of cricket, and especially how competitive cricket is, because that's the other thing England, India, and Australia tell you, is that there's only 3 cricketing nations in the world. There's only 3 good cricketing nations in the world. They're meant to be the best cricketing nations when the only nation that can make a compelling case as the best cricketing nation in the world is Australia. But England want to tell you they're the best. India want to tell you they're the best. You haven't done what Australia's done. You haven't even come close. Let alone what New Zealand does as a small nation, far smaller than Pakistan, far smaller than South Africa, smaller than Sri Lanka, smaller than the West Indies, which is a bunch of nations. But even then, South Africa, doing great things with cricket. Pakistan, the political situation, they're doing great things with cricket. Cricket is growing around the world extensively and comprehensively. So I think we should celebrate cricket a little bit more rather than complaining. But I think most of our complaints are driven by the complaints of England, India, and Australia, who set the tone for the cricketing dialogue. How about that for a little sick rant?
I like it. I'm struggling to come up with things to disagree with. I mean, because the Blackcaps only played 9 ODIs since between the 2023, the end of the 2023 World Cup, and the start of this series. It only played 9 ODIs. Most of those were against Sri Lanka randomly. So clearly that's not a lot. Like, ODIs is no doubt are in a little bit of a precarious spot. But you know who played less than 9 ODIs in the same time frame? Because that wasn't the least. India only played 6 in the same amount. And you know, New Zealand cricket's not out there trying to say we don't want to play ODIs. They're probably a little bit of like, well, sometimes we can't afford to as much. Well, they're trying to. There's a big tournament here that they're preparing to, and putting in some decent prep. Being a part of this tri series is pretty handy. Lesson learned from not doing preparation for the T20 World Cup most recently. So, like, there's a little bit of a financial handcuff there, sure, but like they're taking it seriously when it comes around. And they're not out there, you know, we're not out here trying to say this sucks. Like, throughout the home summer, there were good crowds for all formats. The tests in New Zealand, England were there, so maybe people might have thought like, yeah, the Barmy Army's traveling, they're boosting that up. Well, the Barmy Army left, and the crowds continued to be great for everything else. And will be, because I think there's even some more games after the Champions Trophy. I think we come back and have another tour or something like that. So those will be big crowds as well. Like, people just turn up to watch the cricket, whether it's like the ODIs were the same, the T20s were the same, the tests were the same. India not playing hardly any ODIs and then complaining that ODIs are struggling and dying is a very different vibe, though, isn't it? Because this is sort of like, you know, what's a metaphor here? It's like they stabbed it, and then they're complaining that there's too much violence. Like, they're out there, you know, they stabbed ODIs a couple of times, watched it bleeding on the street, and then are moaning that there's too much violence in the streets. Like, yeah, well, you did this. You're to blame for this. You know, you're not alone, perhaps, but you're part of this problem. So it's a little bit of it's a very I know it's not necessarily the same people, but it's coming from the same environment. So it becomes very like almost disingenuous when people complain about this stuff. I'm sure we're going to have a pretty successful Champions Trophy because the 2 games that I've watched in preparation for it have been fantastic. Like, great games of cricket. Both sides had their moments, less so in the Pakistan-New Zealand game. But even then, like, New Zealand had to fight through the first 30, 40 overs to get to where it looked like maybe they were going to have to settle for 270 or something like that. And then Glenn Phillips went absolutely ballistic. And everyone loved that. Like, even the partisan Pakistan fans were cheering on those, because how could you not? There's hitting sixes all around the park. It was like incredible hitting. That's just setting up what I'm sure will be a pretty exciting Champions Trophy. So that's you know, hopefully this is a little bit of resurgence, because the World Cup was really good too. Like, that was fun. I was watching Ravindra surge out of nowhere and be amazing. Like, when the ODIs get played, the ODIs are great. It's just a matter of finding room in the calendars. But I think we're just in a bit of transitional phase there, where there's too many T20 leagues, too many of the top players are trying to play all the T20 leagues, and we're probably already past that peak. Like, I think we're already coming back down the other side of the mountain, where now a lot of the outside of the top couple of leagues, we're starting to see it's sort of like there's a certain type of player that's going around playing all of them. Jimmy Neesham, that type of player is the one who's playing all those leagues. Then maybe they're starting to cannibalize themselves a little bit. So I think we're coming out of the tunnel there and heading into some good stuff. And I'm pretty excited about this Blackcaps team heading into this Champions Trophy too, because I agree, like the Mitchell Santner stuff, I don't feel like it's necessarily a freshness, like it's a new voice or anything like that. I don't really get that vibe. It just feels like they're more focused and it feels like they're more switched on. And I think the fielding is the first place you see that evident. Like they're taking good catches, with the exception of Rachin Ravindra, but he suffered for that. He learned his lesson. He got stitches in his face for not taking his catch. So there's there are good signs there in the field. There are good signs in the way they fought through some good Pakistani bowling at first, batting pretty slowly when they had to, with Williamson out there, and I think it was Mitchell he had a partnership with, but then still managed to kick on later on. Like there's a tactical element to that, the way they built the innings, the way they fought through a little bit of adversity. Like these are things that when the Blackcaps have struggled a little bit, they haven't done those things. So they just seem switched on in a way, through these first couple of games. And I think it also helps that they have a pretty clear idea of what their best team looks like, which again is something they haven't always known going into big tournaments. Sometimes it hasn't mattered. Like it's 2019 World Cup, they didn't really know who was going to be opening the batting, and they changed it halfway through. They still made the final. They still drew the final. So like this all seems to point towards, I would be careful, because if they do well in warm-up games and then do terrible in the tournament, it doesn't matter what you did in the warm-up games, because those were in service of the tournament. You did crap. So I can't really say that until they actually rip on with the real cricket, but promising signs so far. A lot of different players scoring runs. I do agree probably the beyond Matt Henry seam stuff is maybe the biggest kind of, if O'Rourke's taken a few wickets, if Ben Sayers, or probably Lockie Ferguson at this point. I don't think Ben Sayers did enough to keep Lockie Ferguson out of the first 11 if he's able to be fit and healthy and available. Those guys are taking wickets, and I think the Blackcaps are absolutely in contention to win the whole thing. If they're not, I still think they've got a batting lineup that can chase down 300, because they just did against South Africa, and they set 330 in the other game when it looked like they weren't going to get close to that for a long stage of that innings as well. So there's clearly power, there's clearly hitting deep down the order, and I don't know, they're just ticking a lot of boxes heading into an ODI tournament. I'm like, I want to be reserved about it before things, because there's not really much to gain by just throwing out wild optimism beforehand. Like best case scenario is you just get this level-handed, oh well, this is what I expected. Worst case scenario is you get pie in your face. But I am optimistic heading into this Champions Trophy.
I do want to make one more point about so the number of ODIs played. I don't even care about that. Like, you make your schedule how you want to make your schedule. Every country is different. Every country is working in different parameters. As you said, we got a lot of T20 tournaments. That's cool. T20 tournaments are just eating each other, so we don't necessarily need to worry too much about them. First of all, I think ODI cricket is the best format for a tournament, because it like Test cricket has so much history, and it's not history, it's not tradition, but it's the format that you can chill out with the whole day with. It's like a good friend. It's just there for you for like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, the whole day, usually in the sun, usually with beers and food and just good times. Like Test cricket is quote unquote the best format, but as far as showcasing cricketing skills, ODI cricket's the best format, because you need to bat long, you need to smash the ball, you need to bowl Yorkers, you need to bowl wide ball Yorkers, you need to bowl slower balls, you need to bowl top of off. Fielding matters a lot. So the best cricketers play in the world, they shine in ODI cricket, and the best teams in the world win ODI tournaments. So I'm not even fussed like how ODI cricket fits into the calendar, how it fits into the schedule. Every nation's got different methods, intentions. But, I mean, in New Zealand, ODIs are sold out. In Pakistan for a warm-up series, they're there to watch South Africa versus New Zealand. The ODI featuring Pakistan, they're gone crazy when they've got the Champions Trophy starting in a couple weeks. So I think what I'm saying is we have been told that ODI cricket is dying. But I don't see that.
Yeah.
If you look at the number of games played fresh after a World Cup, you might think that. But again, that's just how the cricket, that's how it flows. When you have a T20 World Cup, you're going to play more T20s. When you got an ODI World Cup, you're going to play more ODIs. When you got a Champions Trophy, you need to play some ODIs. And if you don't, you're going to suck. So that's up to you. Because that's what England did at the last ODI World Cup. They didn't really play any ODIs and they sucked. So again, the proof is in the pudding. And to me, the pudding looks like folks are enjoying some ODI cricket.
And the Champions Trophy has come back as well. You know, the previous Champions Trophy didn't exist because they replaced it with an extra T20 World Cup. Now they've got rid of the extra T20 World Cup and brought back the Champions Trophy, which is ODI cricket's like secondary tournament, right? So it's just the existence of this tournament is already a swing back in favor of one-day internationals.
Yeah, how can ODI cricket be dead when an ODI tournament came back?
It's been resurrected.
Rightio. Ford Trophy. I'm just going to highlight Ford Trophy and HBJ Shield. Highlight just some things, I don't know, because we got to keep moving. And I can feel that I'm struggling to speak. Zach Folks is third in wickets. Well, he's tied with Brett Randall. Brett Randall took a fifer in the last round. But Zach Folks, I'm not going to go through all formats, but I know he's been good in the Super Smash. I know he's been good in the Plunkett Shield. I think there's a case to be made that Zach Folks is the best seamer in all three domestic competitions this summer. Now, that's also happening at the same time, as we said last Thursday in our bonus podcast, where the leading run scorer in all three competitions are youngsters. Reece Mariu, Plunkett Shield, Matt Boyle, Super Smash, Curtis Heafy. He is still leading run scorer in the Ford Trophy. But Matt Boyle did hit a century, 131. In the last game for Canterbury. Here are the batters with 250 or, no, let's go 200 runs and strike rates of 100 or more. The big Donnies, Tom Bruce, 304 runs, strike rate of 113. Chad Bowes, 283 runs, strike rate... Excuse me. Chad Bowes, 283 runs, strike rate of 149.7. Most of that came from his double century. We got Brett Hampton, 247 runs, strike rate of 101.6. Brett Hampton, veteran, lower order slugger. Matt Boyle, 257 runs, strike rate of 100.7. So Matt Boyle is doing some good stuff. Bevan Jacobs hit a few sixes down in Otago. We had Mitch Hay. I think he's done this a couple of times this season. In the round prior to the last round, no fours and like 5 sixes for Mitch Hay. That seems to be a bit of a habit for him. A very cool habit. We all love a 6. Dale Phillips has continued his very aggressive batting at the top of the order for Otago. He had I I think it was the 89. But Dean Foxcroft also hit a century. We've still got Jock McKenzie batting 3 for Auckland. And I believe he hit a 50. Yeah, he hit a 50. But he's batting 3 as a dude who's basically a seeming all-rounder, but he's not now because he's batting 3. And yes, I also saw Ben Pomari hit a 63. That's Ben Pomari, who was batting 3 in the Super Smash, but he bats like 7 or 8 in the Ford Trophy, down the order, and Plunkett Shield as well. So I do like the look of Ben Pomari. Just quickly in the HBJ Shield, Kate Ibrahim seems to be bowling spin now. I'm pretty sure Kate Ibrahim was bowling pace or seam, dibbly dobblers maybe, but seam up. Not seam up because it might have been cross seam, but she was a seam bowler as recently as the Super Smash. Now I think she's a spinner. So that's just a funky note. She's also the only batter who's got 2 centuries. But Maddie Green's the leading run scorer. 2 youngsters that I am tracking both play for Central Districts, Emma McLeod and Flora Devonshire. McLeod has 2 50s, 300 runs. Devonshire's got 3 50s and 264 runs. Emma McLeod, very interesting top order batter because she scores a lot of runs. And Devonshire is a very talented cricketer because she's also 4th in the HBJ Shield bowling rankings, which, as I noted on Thursday in our bonus podcast, and is still the case now, all youngsters at the top of the bowling charts for the HBJ Shield. Eden Carson, dominant this summer, probably the best women's domestic bowler. So we got Zach Folks and Eden Carson. Shout out to them for this fantastic honor. Best bowlers in HBJ Shield: Eden Carson, Bree Illing, Ocean Bartlett, Flora Devonshire, Amy Hucker, Anna Browning, Zara Jetley. I think they're all 25 years or younger. So that's good to see. I do like that. It's a little bit different in the batting charts. Maddie Green, Kate Ibrahim, Caitlin Gurry, who hit a century on the weekend, Bella James, Emma McLeod, Flora Devonshire, Lauren Downs, Susie Bates, Felicity Robertson, Kerry Tomlinson, Sachi Shari. That's why McLeod and Devonshire are so interesting, because they are surrounded by senior batters. Now, at the risk of completely ending my voice, I do want to reaffirm my position on top 30 NRL contracts. Because we did have the Zion Maiu news that we shared, or not the news, but the reaction to his move to the Bulldogs in last week's episode. And now this is another little interesting rugby league observation. There's an Australian journalist who reported last year that Dylan Walker was going to leave the Warriors and return to Sydney. That didn't happen. That same journalist is now reporting that the Warriors released my because they're going to sign an outside back to come into their top 30. Fair play, that seems logical, it might happen. But I don't think any rugby league fan should trust the Australian journalists when a lot of the stuff they say is a bit goofy. But there's a lot of top 30 chat here. And there's a lot of top 30 chat for fans. Like, okay, we lost a player from our top 30. Who's going to come into the top 30? It doesn't matter. We've talked about this with the Blackcaps contracts, but of course rugby league fans probably don't care about Blackcaps contracts, so we'll just stick to the top 30 stuff in the rugby league NRL sense. You can play NRL footy without a top 30 contract. Now, if you're a player, if you're a player, you will earn more money coming into the top 30. So yeah, for the players, as with any contract, it's going to be important for the player. And as far as the Warriors or an NRL team, how they spend their money, they need to have that defined. For fans, there's nothing we should really care about with the top 30. Because the restrictions on development supplementary players, where they could only play after June 12th or whatever it was, they've gone. So you can play round 1 in the NRL, to the best of my knowledge, with a supplementary contract. So whenever I see a player released, my mind does not think about the top 30. I think about the depth chart, and I think about who's going to play, but there's no contract, there's no implications in the contracts on who's going to play. I'm pretty confident that you could be ranked. I think you can play NRL footy without a supplementary contract. You might have to get you might have to get it approved. And it would be a kind of disastrous situation, because then your 35 blokes are unable to play or whatever. Or like 10 blokes in your position that can't play. But a lot of the focus on the top 30, to me, is overstated. So when the Warriors release on my to sign another outside back to their top 30, I'm not tripping about the top 30. They might sign an outside back, but it's not like they need to fill the top 30 spots. They might need to hit the minimum for your top 30. But they've got players on supplementary contracts. They've got training trial players. They can sign a player mid-season who is outside the top 30, is in the top 30. To me, it does not matter. I'm open to being wrong here, because again, this is the murky world of rugby league, where all the salary cap stuff is pretty unclear. But to my knowledge, that is the situation. And it's also important to note, as we've said a few times, like Andrew Webster literally said after Zion Ma'u was released, we're going to promote from within. But then there's another report coming out of Australia that they're going to sign an outside back because they got a top 30 spot to fill. We'll wait to see who is more trustworthy. Of course, the Warriors did play a trial game. The only thing I'm looking for in trial footy are the youngsters. That's it. Like, there are a lot of errors made. Yeah, no shit. It's trial footy. It's their first game of intense rugby league of the year. Now, one of the youngster brackets that I am interested in, this is another weird kind of media attention thing, is the Jett Cleary focus. Even though he literally came on the field, to be fair, he came on the field at the same time as Luke Hansen, so I will give the Jett Cleary hive, which is just the media, I will give them that. And Jett Cleary made 3 kicks. He did all the kicking in that period. The period where the Warriors kept inviting the Sharks back down there in the field, and then the Sharks scored the try to tie the game up because Jett Cleary's kicking wasn't premium. But that kicking balance is the same as the starting halves. So Luke Metcalf had 12 kicks, Te Maire Martin had 1 kick. Last year, when Sean Johnson was playing, he would have 20 kicks. Someone else would have 5 kicks, if that. So to me, that seems like a clear style of distribution. I was kind of impressed with Luke Hansen, like he made some tough tackles, but he didn't get the kicking duties. He has done a lot of kicking in New South Wales Cup though, so to me it seems more like a style that Andrew Webster plays that is pretty flexible though, because you still have the number 6 or the second tier kicker doing some kicking. Youngsters for the Warriors who caught my eye. I thought Vaimonga was fantastic in his stint. He's going to be a top 17 player. Shea Ili. This is the thing about NRL trials. You're watching these youngsters on an NRL field. So you're seeing them with other NRL players and NRL hopefuls, which is very important because when I watch Felix Fa'atili for the Sharks under-21s, he looks like a behemoth. But he looks more like a regular middle forward on an NRL field. Shea Ili, very few touches, very few involvements, but he is someone I think could maybe do a job in the NRL this season. And speaking of, okay, the Warriors need some outside back depth. Shea Ili is a chance. Centre or wing. Dayon Amatuanai, he can play wing, and he's fresh off consistent New South Wales, not consistent, but he's played multiple years of New South Wales Cup footy at the Panthers. Motu Pasikala, he's building towards a full season of New South Wales Cup. Those are the dudes who I'm watching to take those outside back roles. Sam Healy was impressive. Like, the youngsters for the Warriors, I thought, played pretty well. And I'm thinking more like Andrew Webster about the promote from within concept. And that's something that I will double down on right now, as well as double down on the end of the podcast, because we've hit the wall. So shout out to everyone. We appreciate your support. Enjoy the busy sporting times, the crossover period of seasons. And we will be doing our bonus podcast on Thursday. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Church.